Oamaru, I was born, and I don't remember much about my younger life. My father was a guard on the railway, and of course he used to get transferred here and there, and I remember more about Invercargill, because he was moved to there, and I have memories of Invercargill and watching people play as a kid, like Wampy Bell, who nobody would know of now, but he was a great halfback. And I went to the middle school there, and from there went up to Christchurch. My father was transferred to Christchurch. There were 6 of us in the family, 3 boys and 3 girls.
And that was a depression?
Well, the depression started then, and it was pretty difficult times when you had a big family, and I went to the Phillipstown school, and then when I passed my out of the school, I went to night school there, and I had to work through the day because there was not enough money in the family. So I didn't have the opportunity of being a Rhodes Scholar or a Cambridge Blue, but nevertheless it was a very interesting stage in my life, and from there I went on to Ballantyne's in Christchurch, and it was very hard to get in there, and I would think I was pretty lucky though. You used to have to wear a hat. I was only about 16 or 17 years of age, and you had to wear a hat, and you always had to have a white collar on, and they had marvellous discipline throughout that firm. And I think that probably helped me on my way as far as discipline was concerned.
What are your first recollections of rugby?
Well, when I first really got in was when I was playing for Linwood in the side of where old Fergie was famous for later on in life. And my first experience was really with the Linwood Rugby Club. And we won the championship, which Linwood hadn't done for years, and I think I was 18 at the time and weighing about 10 stone 5. We then went on to, we played in the Payne Trophy game, which I'll never forget. I was marking Dave Trevarthen, Simon and Trevarthen, and of course I was 18 years of age. They used to have the what they called the Payne Trophy. They don't have it now, and it was the side that won the competition in Dunedin against the side that won the competition in Christchurch. And of course this day I marked Trevarthen. Of course I was terrified, and in the first 20 minutes he potted 4 goals against me. I couldn't get anywhere near him, but they went on and beat us. They were just too good for us. And then eventually I got into the following year, I got into the Canterbury side, and we toured north. We played in Hawke's Bay, Auckland and Wellington. And then while we were in Auckland, war was declared. And in the side was a fellow, Jimmy Ballantyne, came from Invercargill. He enlisted, and his brother Alec, and I enlisted with them and put my age up. This was in 1940, I was 20 then. And I then joined up with the 5th Reinforcements. My mother was going to stop me because she didn't like the thought of me going to a war, and as all mothers do, they think you're going to get killed. Well, I suppose those chances were on too. But however, I was lucky enough. There was 3 brothers, 2 others beside me. We were all at the war together, and we all came home. We were all overseas, and Jimmy Ballantyne got killed over there, and Alec came back, and I played a game in Gazero. Had a bit of football, and all in all, that was where I actually started my rugby. And when I came back from the war, my family had moved to Auckland, and that's how I became an Aucklandite, even though within my heart I'm an Mainlander.
And so now you're in Egypt or Italy?
We were in Egypt, and then we went on to Italy, and we played a few odd games there, not a lot. We played one in Egypt at the Gazera ground. Eric Tyndall was the halfback. Johnny Smith was playing, And you know, there were quite a few top-notch footballers that played in it. And from there, we went on to Italy.
And did you play against like teams from South Africa, Australia, England?
I didn't play against. We did play against some of the teams from England, the brigade sides and that. And we played a couple of games there, and in Italy, Faenza, we played one, and it was against the British Army.
And then came the brainstorm of General Freiburg.
Yeah, well, he had that in mind, evidently, before before he thought the war was going to end, you know, a lot sooner than it did. And he had appointed Colonel Andrews to start organising, you know, sides, and of course...
So he wasn't a colonel, was he then? He got before you left, the story goes, they gave him an honorary colonel so he could be a bit above you guys.
Well, yeah, he could have been, but he was always, he was a full-time army man. He had been through Dundroon, and he was a pretty good fella, really. Naturally, a lot of the blokes didn't get on because they were privates, and there was always a little bit of feeling about rank, but the Kiwis really didn't have that. He selected him and Charlie Saxton and Jack Finlay. We were in Bari at the time, up north in Italy, and he had them call nominations from the different companies, platoons and battalion, and that was just as the war finished, because he now was going to send this side to England to help to re-establish rugby and sport in the UK, because they'd had nothing. But we played them in Frankfurt and Wuppertal there a game. But he got the side organised, and he sent. There were 30 of us picked to go direct to England, and there was another 90 that went up to Klagenfurt in Austria to have a series of trials. Well, we flew from Bari in Italy in an old Lancaster. It had no seats in it or anything, you just sat on the floor, and but we didn't care, because the war was over and we were going somewhere where you could relax and enjoy life. And the other boys, the 90, they selected another 30 from Austria, and they came across overland through France to the coast and joined us at Margate in England.
So you had 60 players?
60 players.
And then the trial started?
And then the trial started, from which there were 30 picked originally.
And that team went on to play some of the best rugby that Great Britain ever saw.
Well, in all the times I've been over there, like you too, Grahame, they always talk about the Kiwi side, you know, about, they rate them very, very highly. I think probably because they'd been starved of rugby, and the fact that we played 15-man rugby. That was our secret. The whole, the Charlie Saxton, Vic Kavanagh theme, the 3 Ps of rugby: position, possession and pace, the ABCs, and that's what's wrong with rugby today. Rugby's a simple game. They've got to do the simple things correctly, basic fundamentals. But that's all we did, and we had great team spirit and teamwork, backing up, spin back up, and you know, I think we only lost 2 games. I just forget now. It might have been more, but we lost against Scotland. We lost against a side called Monmouthshire. But we unfortunately lost our greatest forward in the opening game, a fellow called Gandhi McLean. And he was a big, strong fellow, you know, and we didn't have a lot of big forwards, and it was a severe loss when we lost him in Swansea.
But it also rekindled that amazing-Welsh-New Zealand brotherly love between New Zealand and Wales. It
definitely started, I think, with the Kiwis. We went back to Wales 3 times, and it was just as if you were going home. or back home, except when you're on the field it was a different story, the old slipper, and they were pretty tough in those days because about 80% of them were miners and not these counter jumpers and corporate boys. You know, they were hard boys, and I'll tell you, when you went down on the ball you knew about it, but off the field they were just fantastic, and that carried on. And all the tours I made some wonderful friends in Wales, the likes of the Jackie Matthews, the Bledden Williams, the Cliffy Morgans, the Hayden Tanners. You know, there were blokes that you could go on, and we still correspond. I still get cards from them all.
The Kiwis in 46 played test matches, or so Bob Scott referred to them as. Did you think of them as a test match?
Oh, quite definitely. Oh yes, there's no doubt about that. You only had to, you know, in Wales we played England, of course, and we went right like a rocket early on and petered out, or not petered out, but oh no, there's no doubt about it. And the atmosphere in Wales, you couldn't not miss it being a test match. Even then, I think they only had about 25,000 at the game because one of the main grandstand had been bombed and they weren't allowed on it. But oh no, definitely test matches were the thing there, and against France and all round. They were back to probably a lot of better test matches than they've played today.
And who gave the team talk?
Charlie Saxton was the captain and coach, and he was a wonderful coach, a wonderful little player. He, unfortunately, he was never really right in the tour because he had a shoulder injury, and he was getting on too, and it just wouldn't sort of go away. But he was a magnificent leader, and he was the main man, that a great motivator. And he knew a lot about rugby, as you would know. When odd times he came in on our discussions and how he helped little Sid Going to improve, and he didn't intrude, but if you asked him, he was delighted to come and do it.
One of the great rivalries there, if that's the right word, was between Cook and Scott, the fullbacks.
Yes, well, it was quite a challenge for them both, because Cookie, in the early stages of the trials and the Kiwi tour, I would have to be honest and say he had the edge on Scotty. And it looked like Cookie might have, you know, got the nod when we went further south to Wales, but he didn't, because Scotty had started to blossom, and of course, knowing how tough it is down there, and he just had no fear, Bob Scott. And in my book, Scott's one of the greatest footballers I know of, fullbacks, and I'll always rate him, you know, beside Napier and Don Clark. But he definitely went from strength to strength, and he was obviously first choice all the way up from there and on, apart from midweek games and that. And it might have affected Cookie a wee bit, because he probably realised that he wasn't going to get any more tests.
And he went to league?
He went to league, he went to league. We played them Hawke's Bay, Auckland played Hawke's Bay, and we gave them a pretty good hiding, and Cookie didn't have the best of games. He went to league after that.
One of the great characters that I've met him on a number of occasions was Jack Finlay.
Oh, well, there was only one Jack Finlay. He was like Meadsy, I think. When they made the mould of them, they threw it away. Old Jack, and I'll tell you what, he was a wonderful footballer. He was a wee bit in the mould of probably Joss Kronfeld. He used his feet a lot, but very intelligent, and he would always loom up if you made a break. Finlay would be there, and he really, one of the funny things about old Jack was they were picking a side in Wellington back to the All Blacks, and he loved his racing. There's no doubt about it. He always had best bets or things in his pocket, and they were sitting down, sitting in a room, the three selectors, and Finn was lying on a bed, and they were all talking about a position. And Finn suddenly pipes up and he said, "Who do you think will win the Parliament?" Well, that just broke the selection panel up.
And a brave man.
Oh, very brave man. He earned his MC, and poor old Jim Sherritt used to carry all his bags and things. But no, Jack Finley was a fine man. He didn't play in the test in Auckland because he was rushing off to get a pie on his way up on the old train, and he hit a board at Pukekohe and he just disappeared. He never told anybody, and they were wondering where Finn was. We were playing Australia, and nobody knew. He just turned around and went back home.
That team became, as we all know, the nucleus of New Zealand rugby in '46, and we were very lucky to have that springboard.
Well, I think we were, because they not only they brought the style of rugby back. See, league was getting a very strong hold, particularly in Auckland and Canterbury, and not that there's anything wrong with league, it doesn't matter, because I think there's enough room for all sports.
But that game when you came back to Auckland,
yeah, when Kiwi, when it was 20 all draw, well, we'd only been back a fortnight and we'd had about 6 or 7 weeks on the boat, and we opened up pretty well but ran out of steam, and then we played 5 games. I played in the 5. It was the Saturday, the Tuesday, the Saturday, the Tuesday, and the Saturday. You know, they go on complaining about playing too many games, and makes you wonder. We had not much time in between, and I feel there's too much time now. The fellas are hanging around too much, in my opinion. They've got too much on their mind, and I just sort of think that the Kiwis showed what can be done. The ball never went out in Christchurch, when we beat Christchurch Canterbury about 30-something, 1-3 or something. The ball never went out for about 15 or 18 minutes. They couldn't believe it. It's hard to believe the ball not going out, because we didn't believe in kicking. We would pass the ball and hang on to it, what they need to do these days.
And then came the first test. You were named captain against Australia.
Yeah, well, that was in Dunedin. And I think I was probably very fortunate, because had Charlie Saxton not had the shoulder injury, I'm sure Charlie would have been the All Black captain.
So what did it feel like underneath the standard carriage putting on that All Black jersey and as the captain?
Well, it gave you tremendous spirit and pride. I think probably we don't pay enough attention to that these days, and it's a wonderful feeling when you pull that jersey on. You seem to be about 10 feet higher, and I think to most players it means a lot, and I know somebody wanted to swap my jersey, but at the time there was no way they were ever going to get that jersey from me under no circumstances.
I washed mine in the bath myself. No one was getting mine either.
Oh no, well they're an item you wanted to keep, and unfortunately I haven't got it now, but that's just, I loaned it to somebody to go to a fancy dress ball and never came back.
So in 1947, the first overseas tour since the war to Australia.
Yeah, well, that was very interesting from the point of view that we went over by flying boats, Teal, and we left from the base down where that new hotel is now, or new restaurant is. I've just forgotten I've been there once to it, but that we left from there, and of course landed in Sydney in the harbour, and yeah, that was the beginning of the, you know, an exciting tour, because first time we'd flown, and poor little Jimmy Kearney never liked flying, and the old seaplane, she dropped about 1,000 feet at one particular time going over there, and I think old Jimmy wet the rompers. And he lay down on his head down, he didn't want to look at anything, but however we got there, and it was a great tour really, the 47 tour, because Australia were just getting back in line, and after the war, and they've always had, and they still have, they've always got great backs, and they had wonderful backs in that tour. We won the test in Sydney, and we were playing with about, I think they had 28,000 there, and next door there was a league game on at the showground, and they had 52,000 people. Just gives you an idea of the difference, the popularity between the two codes in those days. Of course, now it's reversed. I mean, they're rugby mad, and you know, they'll go on for a long time. But we found that Australia weren't quite so strong in the forwards, and I remember one incident in the first test. Old Johnny Simpson, they had a fella that was poor old Phil Hardcastle, the fella, the doctor that was looking after. He poked his head up, and Johnny went to hook him. Of course, in those days there was no television, and of course Charlie Willicks, our lock, he pokes his head up at the same time. Johnny copped him and split his eye open, and poor old Charlie had to go off. But it was Phil Hardcastle was meant to cop it, and old Johnny's never forgotten that when you bring it up. But no, it was a great tour, and it put us back on deck, and it made us realise we had a lot of talent. Johnny Smith, of course, and people like Maury Goddard. They never saw the best of Maury Goddard and Wally Argus. All round, it was a wonderful tour, and old Harold Strang was our manager, and Norman Mackenzie was the coach. But there again, it was mainly left to me, you know, to coach the side. Old Norm used to stand round behind the goalposts and, you know, bellow instructions. But he was a great tactician, and he was a wonderful old man, really. In those days, they knew a lot about rugby. There's a lot of pride, and they knew it. Nowadays, I said, a lot of people don't seem to know too much about it in our headquarters, and I think that's sad. But the tour became very popular, and we won the test, we've won in Brisbane, but they didn't have a big crowd there. But rugby wasn't quite up with it then, and as I said, they didn't have the big forwards. 48
there was no test matches, and then 49 you had the tour to South Africa, and you seemed to have All Black trials all around New Zealand.
Yeah, well, of course there was no, as you said, no tour. There was no tour. There was no test match in 48. That's an unheard of thing, really, in rugby in this day and age. But the worst feature of that tour, I feel, at the beginning, was the fact that we were picked, the side was selected in October, and we had to go through a long period of holidays, Christmas, and it's hard to stop players from enjoying themselves. That's natural, isn't it? And I always remember that they had, there was a cry for, you know, big backs, and the forwards had to have, you know, a lot of weight, and there were one or two of the forwards. I remember when we had the weigh-in at Kensington Park in Whangarei. We had a trial up there, and we had a weigh-in there, and it was quite funny. Some of the hard case ones were putting lead in their boots, and they had it in their supports to give themselves a bit of extra weight, so so they could make the tour, so give them an opportunity of saying they were half a stone heavier than they really were. But the tour itself was, of course, we had 27 days on the boat. When we finally left, we left on an Easter, I think it was, and we trained down here, strangely enough. The All Black side, all the Auckland members trained down here. We were down here in 48 and training on the beach here, and there were about 8 houses when you look around and see it now. At any rate, we had 27 days on the boat, and of course, what can you do on a boat? She wasn't exactly the Queen Mary, the old bay, well, I forget what it was now, but they had a sister ship, and it was supposed to be a gay boat, the sister ship was, but the 27 days, I said, you're rolling in the Indian Ocean, and players, well, they naturally drink on a boat and eat, and you couldn't keep the weight down.
But you were selected in October.
We were selected in October and left in April. And of course that made it very difficult, because when we finally got to Africa, there were four of our team were 3 and 4 stone overweight. And of course, being the crafty old guy old Downey Craven was, even though he was a fine man and a wonderful footballer,
he was cunning as
he was very cunning. I quite agree with you, and he'd suck most people in. But he sends us to Hermanus, which was the French Riviera of South Africa, and there there wasn't a decent training field there. And then he turned on cocktail parties and balls and
hot and cold running women.
Oh God, I'll tell you what. Any case, that was only part of the tour, really. They were a pretty good side, by and large. The other bad feature was that when we went up to Rhodesia, which now is, of course, Zimbabwe, out of 13 days, we spent 10 on the train. They were very comfortable trains, beautiful meals and drink.
But a train crash too, didn't you?
That in the middle we had a train crash, but we went up there, we played 2 games, and when the train used to stop at night, it could be 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, to fill up with water and coal, we'd get out and have a run, and in the dark. And of course, don't sound as if I'm making a lot of excuses, but this is exactly what happened. And we played 2 games in Rhodesia.
You lost one, didn't you?
We lost one. They scored 2 tries. We only had 8 tries scored against us in the whole 24 games. We played in South Africa, and we were there, of course, for 5 months. But it was a great tour, and when you look back and think, the comradeship and camaraderie, that helped, I think, to build up New Zealand rugby, because even it was a disaster for people like myself to lose 4 tests. I only played in the 2 tests, and when it came to picking the 3rd test, we were training Neville Black to play halfback in a test match, and our halfbacks were both, well, and I just, when they came to picking the team, I said, right, I've done all I can do, I'm out, I'll take over the coaching, which I had really been doing, and I only played the first 2 tests. But we were only beaten by 3 and 6 points. There wasn't a hell of a lot in it at any stage, and as I said, they were a great team, and the thing that made me so proud of them, people said, well, how can you be proud when you lose 4 tests? Well, I can assure you I was very proud of them, because on the way home I said to the management, I'd like to have a talk to the team, before we get back to Wellington, and there's a few things I want to iron out with them. So they agreed, and we met in the lounge on the boat, And I just said to the blokes, well look, this is the situation. We've been beaten, it's going to be the same in 1,000 years' time. There's going to be other people going to come to South Africa, other sporting bodies, not just rugby players. I said, we can't change the score. I said, it'll be the same 1,000 years' time, so if you're going to blame anybody, blame me, because I knew they were going to get into the management. And I felt that wasn't quite fair, really, because they were pretty good managers, even though Alec was 66 years of age and a wonderful old gentleman. He had coached the All Blacks in 1921, and of course this is 1949, isn't it? But he was a fine, and I had to, because with the high altitudes and that, he got sick a lot, and he just couldn't cope with it, which is natural. As you know yourself, Grahame, the altitude gets to you in the chest and the throat, and you've either got to go up there and play straight away or be acclimatised and have 8 or 9 days up there. So all in all, I said to the team, well, that's it. And I thought, well, no, there's always bound to be somebody's going to say something. There weren't many people to meet us in Wellington when we got back, I can assure you. And well, it was about 15 or 18 years before anything ever came out. I said to them, don't blame referees, that's not going to help the situation. But I always said the first time there was neutral referees, even then I said we'll win a series in South Africa.
Well, I've been there, I've lived there, I've played rugby there, and I will never say that they're on the level. I had terrible times with referees when I lived there. I would almost say that at times they weren't incompetent, they were cheats.
Oh, well, yeah, I've got an opinion about that too, Grahame, but I don't like to say it, but that terrible incident with Bruce Robertson.
This was 1976.
Yeah, even Danny Craven, I believe at the after-match function, said that the All Blacks should have won. We could have had a neutral referee, but the rugby union wouldn't accept it. Well,
70.
How silly that was. I mean, after our 49 experience, they should have accepted.
Yes.
And I said over and over again, but it took us till, when was it, 93, when
we went over there, was it 90?
When we won the series here, was it?
91 or 92.
Yeah, well, that was and we had neutral referees.
When you came back, and even today people almost say 1949, Fred Allen, the All Blacks. How did it affect you?
Oh, well, it affected you. I mean, it hurts. I mean, I even, when I walked off the field after the Joburg game with Felix Duplessis, I had my arm on his shoulder, and you know, I had a smile. And I was ostracised in the papers, but as I said, the game's over. I mean, I was hurting like hell inside, but you weren't going to change it. I mean, as I said earlier, it's 1,000 years, it'll still be the same score, and people criticised me, and I think that's why I was always, even though I say it myself, very popular whenever I returned to South Africa. I was there about 7 times, I think, and I was always well received, and I think because we didn't whinge about losses and things and complain. You felt like it, but what good was it going to do?
So when you came back from South Africa, you sort of licked your wounds and then got into club rugby with Grahame.
Yeah, I started coaching. A couple of years I did nothing. I just, it was hurting too much to get involved. And even though I loved rugby, it was my life, as it proved later on, because you still do a little bit even at my age now. But I just couldn't face up to getting out and getting on with it again. But in time, like everything else, time's a great healer, and then I started coaching Grammar Old Boys, who I had a few games for in between the war period, and we did, you know, we did pretty well, and then of course it came to Auckland.
Was this after this 56 Springboks tour? Do you think that sort of took some of the heat off you when we beat the Springboks in 56?
Yes, that was a great feeling when we beat them. You know, it was something that I knew was going to happen one day, but just when, you don't know. But it was like our one in Christchurch, when we should have had the revenge I wanted, the whitewash, when we were leading 16-3 at half time, and our friend
Gainsford?
Well, he scored 2 brilliant tries, but that naughty, when he kicked that streaky looking goal, it was like a guided missile. But really speaking, that would have really made my day. I remember quite clearly at half time, good old Neil McPhail gave me a pat on the knee and he said, "We're home, Fred." I said, "Not yet, Neil," I said. And of course we weren't, and he kicked that goal and they beat us.
But you were at Eden Park in 56 when Peter Jones scored the try.
Yeah.
How did you feel that day?
Oh, I sort of, I felt on top of the world, and even though in people's eyes it was a great try, but I don't really think it was a great try.
You just ran straight.
It was the moment. See, Hemi started it. And poor Ron Hemi's dead now, not long ago, and the ball bounced up, and poor old Viviers, I mean, as you know, he didn't like too much pressure. Look at that one after Wellington, and he again, he didn't, he was...
Yours?
And he just, old Peter was up there and he just swept the ball away and off. But when you talk of tries, you couldn't compare Ian Kirkpatrick's try, or Peter, you couldn't compare Peter's try. Kirkpatrick's try was one of the best forward tries I think I've ever seen.
And after the game, did people come up to you and say anything to you?
Oh yes, so they were all, you know, now you got your revenge, but, well, I didn't get it, the All Blacks got it, but that feeling was always there, and as you know, I really wanted to go back to South Africa in '67, when where we were going, and I was really looking forward to that because I reckon we had a side that was capable of beating South Africa. When I look at it, we may not have had the depth probably all round in our 30, but we had a side, a test side that was very definite. Winner. But then I went on to coach Auckland, and I'll tell you what, I had a pretty rocky path for 2 or 3 years. We didn't have a lot of depth in our team.
Especially up front?
Well, we didn't have a lot of backs either. And I co-opted Johnny Simpson as my forward coach, who was a wonderful forward, one of the great front row forwards in my book. And we were probably lucky we picked up the shield there again. And I said I'd stay, you know, I went on 7 years I think I had with them. But I could see the old, once again, the old hammer was about to fall. But fortunately, of course, we picked up the
log of wood.
The log of wood in 59.
In Southland.
And that probably saved my neck, and I might have got the Humpty after.
But isn't it interesting that one particular incident, sort of, which you took in both hands and ran with it, made you what you are, the most famous rugby coach probably in the world?
Well, I won't say that, Graham, but I've had a lot of success with all sorts of sides.
But that was a turning point.
That was the turning point, you're right, in my picking up that.
And then you lost it and won it back again. More luck.
Well, yeah, well, we were there again. It was lucky, but we were fair and squarely beaten by North Auckland here in Auckland in the 60s, and of course we went up...
by sheer chance you had another crack at them 2 weeks later.
Yeah, and we went up and got it back off them, and poor old Ted was very upset about it all, but he was a wonderful coach. I know I walked into their changing room to wish them, you know, all the best, as I always did with any opposition. boy, I was nearly thrown out of the room and I'd get out so and so. But she was always a pretty tough game against North Auckland. There was no beg your pardons there, and of course they wouldn't get away with it today, you know, with television and that. But of course then we went on and we had a pretty successful time really with the Shield, helped to build the new stand, and we had some wonderful moments and some very close calls.
Canterbury, they don't particularly enjoy you in Canterbury for that game.
Well, it was, as you know, it was a Wednesday afternoon, Tuesday or Wednesday, I forget, but I was keeping the team as close as I could to get in the hotel, so we got to the game just as it started, and I made up a story about the Shield. We always had the Shield in the commercial room, and I'd just at the middle of the night used to wake up and think about all sorts of things, and any rate, I just thought it'd be an idea if I didn't have the Shield there. I knew somebody would say, "Where's the Shield?" So of course it happens. During the team talk, somebody said, "Where's the Shield?" I said, "Oh well," I said, "as a matter of fact," I said, "I gave it to Canterbury to have a photograph taken of it with the team so that they could have it in the press on the next morning." I said, "and they haven't returned it." Well, if you'd have seen the looks on their faces and that, you didn't need much more of a team talk. But of course, when we went to the game, they had about 33,000, which then was a record for a midweek game. And of course, the old trams were blocking it. And of course, we got to the game the game was 10 minutes late. And I remember Pat Ryan was going to call, say, a win by default, and of course there was a lot of heat in it, and that was a game with poor old Bunny Tremaine. I told him, he was a mate of the Canterbury side, he'd played for them, and he'd just come back from Africa with Willie and them, and I said, "Well, you know old Tiny Hill," I said, "just push him around, annoy him." We didn't have a great line out set up. We used to alternate and have a lot of different moves or calls, not as many as they have now, and we certainly wouldn't be throwing it to the opposition. And I said, "Just keep at him," and I said, "You're a mate of his." So poor old Bunny, he just kept niggling away at him, and finally about 3 minutes before the end of the game, old Tiny must have decided he'd had enough. And he said, he looked round at Tremaine and he said, "You do that again, Tremaine." He said, "I'll whack you." And of course, poor old Bunny said, "Have a go, Grandad." And he had a go, and of course he knocked old Bunny clean out. And they carted him off into and I rushed down, and I heard a roar. I went and see how he was, and I rushed out to the head of the tunnel, and I just saw Walker going round with Willie yelling out behind the post, pointing, and so, you know, all in all, it was a wonderful period with the Shield, and we had some tremendously close calls. Hawke's Bay probably should have beaten us at least once. It was only an ankle tap by poor little on Bill Davis that stopped it the first time, and the second time we drew 3-3.
Malcolm scores.
Yeah, and we were, I think, very lucky too. And when the game, Wellington took it off us. I remember little Mackie Heroini, who was a wonderful little footballer. You know, he wasn't a good tourist, but he had all the skills out, and he could do the unreal thing, and he came to, when we lost it, I went round and he had tears in his eye, and old Mackie said, "Don't worry, boss," he said, "we play them next Saturday, we'll get it back." And I said, I looked at him, I said, "Mackie," I said, "I don't want the bloody thing back." I said, "I've had enough." And poor little Mackie looked at me. But no, it was a great period, and it took 22 years before somebody finally broke it, and you know, which was a long time, isn't it?
So the Shield went to Wellington, you retired as Auckland coach, and Auckland nominated you as a New Zealand selector.
Yes, well, it was a rather difficult position because Ron Bush was then a New Zealand selector, and with them nominating me, I presume they had to, for the fact that I'd had a successful Shield era, they had to find a spot for me. I wasn't probably such the bad boy in those days, and so they appointed 5 selectors, which of course I think was a silly idea, really. 5 selectors to make makes the job more difficult. But at any rate, that was fair enough, because we only, I think we only had one game there. That was against Australia in a, I forget what they called it, some sort of a centenary game or something. So that was my first year under Neil McPhail.
And then in '66 you got the prize.
Well, yes, it was something I'd always hoped once I got back into the game. I'd always hoped one day I might be a coach of the All Blacks.
Officially, not unofficially.
Yeah, officially. Yeah. But at any rate, it was an exciting challenge, and you know, I wasn't that old then. I had a fair way in front of me to look forward to. I was hoping for probably 2 or 3 years at the most.
But you also stuck with players, because that '66 side didn't change the forward pack. You didn't have to change it.
No, well, really speaking, it was a wonderful forward pack. When you look at people like, you know, Ken Gray and Wilson had retired by then. Yeah, you know, we really had any side that's got a Meads or 2 of them. Or 2 of them. And there was a terrible tragedy, really, when, as far as I was concerned, when Stan Meads retired, because to me he was a wonderful footballer, and I remember giving Pine Tree a send-off in my first run. It was in the Wellington College school ground, or their shed, and Terry McLean had written up Pine Tree in the Wanganui Thames Valley game, and he'd given him a terrific write-up. And the first thing I think I started off, Barry Thomas had, he talks about it, he'd gone away for some physio or something, and he arrived just as I started talking to the team, and I got into Pine Tree, and I said, I thought we may as well know where we stand. I said, it wasn't you, Pine Tree, that had the great game according to Terry McLean. I said, it was your brother Stan. I said, so let's make that very clear right now. And then I started getting into a few of them, and poor old Barry Thomas said he put his foot in the door and he pulled it out. They had a door, you know, you close and those shit. He said, I didn't know whether to come in or stay. He tells it now, and I quite enjoy it. But
well, I remember the same shed after the French test in '68, which we nearly lost, but we just managed to win the last minute. Well, we had a council of war there, and you weren't too good that day either.
No, well, I think there's a time when you do. It's no use getting into players right after a game. You go and enjoy yourself, you know that. I'd never get in your ear, or I'd say, righto, enjoy yourself. Mind you, the next day I might at a team conference, but I wasn't calling conference or team talks all the time. I didn't have them that often, only when the occasion warranted it. But, oh no, I think another thing, there's a bit too much talking and not enough doing. I was more of a doer. Talk, sure, on rugby. I had my knowledge. I felt that was all right and capable of winning games, but you don't have to be talking all the time. We'd have a talk, as you'd know, on a Friday night, and then the team talk on the Saturday, and that was about it. We might have a constructive talk after a game. I was, as you know, I used to encourage the players to speak up individually, long as it was constructive, not destructive. And I think that's how we became a pretty good side, because we had wonderful team spirit. And the great thing about rugby, if I may quote, the games are won in those last 20 minutes. And that's when you find out if your team's got that guts and will to win and that passion for the black jersey. That's when you pull it out. And how many times have you seen that happen of late? I'm a great believer in that. You've got to have that will to win. And to do that, you must learn the basics, the simple things. I mean, the worst feature is the handling and passing. Well, if you can't do that, you're throwing the ball away to the opposition. And nowadays, more than ever, once you lose that ball, the other side's certain to get it. Should get it in line-outs and scrums.
One of your great disappointments was that the 67 tour to South Africa was cancelled.
Well, yes. It was sad because I really wanted to go back to South Africa and
kick ass.
As time went by and I could see the shape of the players available, I was sure we had the nucleus of a side that would win, could beat South Africa. Because at that stage we had a great forward pack, we had plenty of young brilliant backs, but you know, like everything else, the key to success are any side of your forwards. And the old story, it's position. You have to be up to your line-outs, your scrum, your rucks, your body positions, and I think we're lacking a few of those basics now. And there's no reason why we should be. I just feel there's got to be more concentration on those vital factors of the game.
Did you have up here your coaching thoughts all the time? Like you knew about it from when you were sort of 20?
Yeah, well, yeah, I did really, because I get back to the thing again, rugby's a simple game, and if you stick to the basics and believe in yourself, I mean, you've got to be a psychologist, you've got to be a doctor, you've got to be a teacher, a coach. These days, they have all those head shrinkers and all those people around.
Tarot card readers?
Yeah. And something old Pine Tree told me, didn't know what it meant.
Biomechanical.
Is that what it is?
Biomechanist. A biomechanist.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, there's too many people, too many hangers-on. And I think, I don't want to be criticising anybody, but I feel we've lost the value of club spirit and that. I think players are getting too much money. I don't blame them for getting money. Good on them. I mean, we couldn't complain about getting our 7 bob a day, and we only got it when we were on tour. We didn't get it all through the year. And if you ran a business, you had to go and leave it behind and go and, hope it was still there when you went back. But no, I think you've got to realise the club is the guts and cornerstone of our rugby, and that's where we're losing out.
67, we went to England, and I always think of the parallel between your Kiwi side in 45, 46 and our side in 67.
We were going to play winning rugby. The British didn't believe it. Nobody, the IRB said, were very sceptical about it, but in the end they had to admit it was great rugby, and we were probably in the first 3 or 4 sides, best sides that ever went to UK. And the Kiwis are still rated about 4th or 5th there when you hear people talking, which is quite something.
So what, to Fred Allen, is the future of this wonderful game of rugby?
Oh, I think we might be heading in the right direction. I think the future of our rugby is very healthy, but we've got to get back to a little bit more discipline and self-discipline. We've got to make the players realise the game's not for 60 minutes, it's for 80 minutes plus. And that's why I've always said to you, Grahame, about the arse knocker. That comes in. People probably get sick of hearing that, but it comes in because that shows you whether you've got any guts, and there's no substitute for guts, because that makes you go when your rings hanging out at the end of a hard training run, and you must confess our runs weren't easy.
Yes.
And to think that if somebody didn't run like old Hoppy, back we go again. That's self-discipline. And if somebody...
Self-preservation.
Well, as you know, if somebody dropped the ball, back again we did it. But that's not being smart. That's trying to build up confidence and make people think what they're doing. And when you get tired, it gets harder to think. You know, they're the things that are important. And it's good for our country. I mean, the All Blacks have got to get back on top, and they can do it. I'm sure of it.